Unchurned is presented by UpdateAI.
There are, from a customer success management standpoint, there are, I would say, three core objectives that you could focus on: risk mitigation, adoption maturity, and expansion. So
Hmm.
the question is, where do you want to focus first, right? Ideally, you're able to do all three of those things at the same time, but
Right.
sometimes you're not, right? So the question is, of those three sort of motions or priorities, where do you focus? And then for us, we have 3 or 4 major business lines.
So where did you focus? Or sorry, you're about to tell me.
When we first started, it was around risk mitigation.
Okay.
And then we also made a choice around, here are the 4 businesses. We can only invest right now to be able to really, really help influence GRR and a subset of the business. Where should we go? And so we focused in on a subset of the business. And that's where really our first 24 months, 24 to 30 months was really just focused on.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to this latest episode of Unchurned. I'm Josh Schachter, host and CEO of UpdateAI, and I'm here today with Colin Murphy. Colin is the Chief Customer Officer at BMC Software, a little company, small company based in, you guys are based in New England, Boston?
We're based in Houston, Texas, and Santa Clara, California.
Okay. All right. Colin, great to meet. Well, we've met. Great to have you on the show. I actually had Eduarda Camacha on the show a couple of years ago, who you used to report to, and now you're filling her role.
That's right.
And so it's great to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me. I've watched listened to this show in the past. I always saw it on LinkedIn, and I remember I clicked on it and I listened to it. I don't know if it was Eduarda's call or if it was a different one, but I've listened to a few of them over time.
Well, thanks for not holding it against me. So tell everybody, BMC, you guys do a lot of things, big, kind of like a blue chip company in the tech world. So tell everybody, in case they're not familiar with BMC, what it is that you do.
Sure. Yeah. BMC Software has been around since the early 80s. So we're a little over 40 years old, which is a really strong heritage in enterprise software. I like to call it, it's more like, I would say, data center software. We have a few different product lines, major product lines. But fundamentally, we sell to the CIO and the CIO of any kind of industry vertical. So we have retail customers, we have government customers, we have telecommunications and tech customers, we have financial and insurance customers, we have all kinds of different industry verticals. And the major kinds of software that we sell is really around service management, so employee service management, IT service management, and then IT operations management, so software that's sold to a CIO and their team so that they can better manage their infrastructure and their applications and their data. And then we have also automation software that helps, again, ensure that all of an organization's private clouds, public clouds, applications are all communicating with each other as efficiently and as effectively as possible.
Awesome. So now in this role that you've had for a little while, about a year, you're reporting directly to the CEO. You, under your remit, you've got customer success, you've got technical support and CX and product education, about 1,400 people across 35 countries.
Yes.
I'm feeling overwhelmed just spitting that out. What am I missing?
No, that's right. And the company is about 65, 66, 6,700 or so total employees. So if you think of that in the context of the CS organization, it's a pretty significant portion of the overall company. So yeah, you said it: services, customer success management, support, customer experience, education, that entire spectrum of what you call kind of post-sales type of functions.
Okay, cool. So I want to get back to that. I want to get back to like a day in the life of somebody that has 1,400 reports, because again, that just kind of boggles my mind. And I know obviously there's a lot of people that listen to this program that are aspiring to reach the levels of that type of I'll call it authority and ownership and influence. So you guys have been a very profitable company through the years, like you said, around 40 years. So really stable blue chip type of tech company. Not necessarily known for your growth. I mean, you're not a YC Combinator startup,
True,
as it were. But that is, I believe, a priority of yours, becoming more and more of a priority. Am I right?
it is. It is a fair statement. Yeah, but BMC is has I think there are a lot of really good things about the business, and anybody who looks externally and outside in and looks at the business, there's a lot to really like about it. Like you said, it was it was a private company, then it was a public company, now it's a private company. It's been owned by some of the really big private equity firms that many of your listeners are familiar with, and the reason why we've been so successful is we do have it's a very profitable business. We do have cloud and on-premise business, but it's very profitable. I think historically that BMC has had bouts of time when there's been growth. It's always been profitable, but the growth is in periods of time in our history we've had maybe a couple steps forward and then a couple steps back, a couple more steps forward and then a step back. I think if you look at the last several years, last 5 years, we've really turned the page and moved into not just a profitable company, but a company that's growing at a meaningful number now. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're highly profitable, then there's not necessarily as much pressure to grow. You're in a good situation to start out with. So as you think about that overall OKR true north of growth becoming more prominent over the past couple of years, what are some of the ways that you, in your role, and maybe we have to break this down because you do have, remit over several different channels, but like, how are you, let's talk about customer success. How are you approaching that challenge from that group?
Well, I think 5 years ago, BMC did not have a customer success management function in name. And so over the last 5 years, we've assembled it from pockets of people that were doing what I would call CSM type of activities. And then we've added to those, to that team. And now we have a global function and a global program. And honestly, a lot of the focus initially was around the GRR portion of the equation. So we're looking at GRR and NRR and just overall growth. We had a real challenge with certain elements, certain parts of our business where we had some GRR leakage, too much GRR leakage. So a lot of the value that we've created from a customer success management standpoint, at least initially, was very much focused on risk identification, risk management, risk mitigation, and just being much more deliberate about gross retention and about taking care of customers. And I think we've sort of evolved to more, not just risk mitigation, but also focusing on all things related to adoption and adoption maturity, and then also setting the table for expansion. So we've kind of started with a real focus on stemming the leaky bucket, and we've moved into something that's been much more about expansion versus just risk mitigation. So that's on the CSM side.
Well, so as you say that, I'm actually pulling up LinkedIn to look at your profile here because I believe you said it's been 5 years. 5 years ago, you didn't have a CS team.
Correct.
And then, okay, wait for it. It's loading here. I think if I look at your profile, you've been at BMC for about a little over 5 years. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So this is the Colin Murphy show, the CS group at BMC.
Well, I would say this, what was pretty cool about this, and this isn't always the case, but I'll let you know, is when when KKR bought us, one of the value stories or value drivers that they were really interested in was, how do we mitigate risk and how do we improve our renewal rates and how do we improve gross retention? So KKR bought us 6 years ago, right? So I came in 5 years ago, and I was tasked already with, hey, this is something that's been identified as something that's really important. Let's help roll it out across the organization.
Because you came in, you were the VP. I have it now. You were VP, Chief of Staff to the CEO, and Head of Corporate Initiatives.
Yes.
So KKR placed you there, or somebody placed you there, to say, hey, we've got these growth initiatives now. We're part of KKR. And this must have been at the very top of a punch list, right?
It was one which was really cool. I mean, it was already a board level initiative. I was brought in because I had worked in the past with the CEO, Iman. I had a relationship with him, and he wanted me to come in and help him structure the organization. So that was the chief of staff piece. But he also said, oh, and by the way, there's this board level initiative, which is, we were calling it customer value realization at the time, but really what it is customer success management.
Yeah.
So a lot of my focus in the initial years was just rolling out the program and getting people across BMC to understand it. And look, I think we've made a really big impact. We're not the only ones that are driving that impact. I would say that we're part of a pretty good story around what we're doing around risk mitigation and all the things that we're focused on and being deliberate operationally. But the product has gotten better. The sales team is linked in very closely with us. That includes all elements of the sales team. So it's I think we've been driving it for sure, and we've been championing it quite a bit. But I think the overall ecosystem has improved quite a bit. And I think our customers have benefited from it as well.
When you say championing it, it's customer centricity.
Customer centricity, which sounds
Yeah.
Motherhood and apple pie, but it was something that needed more attention here for sure.
Hey everybody, it's Josh. I'm taking a quick break from the podcast to tell you a bit about UpdateAI. I started UpdateAI to solve two major challenges for CS teams. The first is that we save CSMs 4 to 5 hours per week with our productivity through AI. Secondly, we give leaders a window into all the conversations across each account and the entire portfolio. So we help knowledge transfer, we help increase the coverage model of your CS teams, and we help you detect emerging patterns in what your customers are telling your CSMs across all the risks, product feedback, advocacy moments, and expansion opportunities. So come check us out at www.updateai. It's completely free to sign up and trial.
What's your, what's your 3-step, 5-step, 10-step recipe playbook from your experience with BMC of getting this going?
Yeah, I think there is. You have to make sure first and foremost that you're identifying or you're defining what it is the objective of the organization is. So at that time, it was just the customer success management team. So you have to lay out, here are all the things that we could focus on, both functionally and from in this geo or in this particular product line or whatever. But here are all the things that we can focus on, but here we're going to focus on here instead, because this is where the biggest challenge is. Does everyone agree with that, with those objectives? Okay, fine. So you check that box. You get everyone to understand, here are all the things that you could do, but really this is what you want to spend your time on, right? So that's the first.
You mean we could think about top line growth, but let's spend our time thinking a bit more deeply about customer intent and.
No, what I'm actually saying is in the context of a larger company like BMC that's spread out all over the place and has multiple business lines, and multiple functions, just like any other software company. There are, from a customer success management standpoint, there are, I would say, 3 core objectives that you could focus on: risk mitigation, adoption maturity, and expansion. So the question is, where do you want to focus first, right? Ideally, you're able to do all 3 of those things at the same time, but
right.
Sometimes you're not, right? So the question is, of those 3 sort of motions or priorities, where do you focus? And then for us, we have 3 or 4 major business lines.
So where did you focus? Or you're about to tell me.
When we first started, it was around risk mitigation.
Okay.
And then we also made a choice around, here are the 4 businesses. We can only invest right now to be able to really, really help influence GRR and a subset of the business. Where should we go? And so we focused in on a subset of the business. And that's where really our first 24 to 30 months was really just focused on very much around risk and a little bit of adoption, and on a particular couple of product lines or business lines, which, this is a significant portion of our overall business, but still.
Sure.
And then we evolved over time. But I think you said 10-step or 5-step. One of the first couple steps are around getting everyone to understand what it is you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Where it is you're focusing. And then you need to define, what the program is. And from a CSM perspective, you need to define what that motion is going to look like, what the team is going to do, what the team isn't going to do, and making sure that that's clear. And then you need to make sure that everyone in the organization understands what those things are, and you need to measure and track them. And you need to be flexible each year on, what the priorities are, as far as, tracking the things that you think are the right things to do, because it's going to lead to the financial results that you're trying to get as a company. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. I mean, it's so simple, but I've actually never heard it articulated as the 3 things basically that CS is, which is risk mitigation, adoption and expansion and renewal, right? I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do you recall what were the things that you were tracking in that first phase of risk mitigation that moved the needle?
Yeah. I would say customer engagement, at a high
Yeah.
level, it was like, okay, so here are the 100 or 200 accounts that we wanted, or 150 accounts that we wanted to focus on. Okay, and here are the 5 things that we expected that we wanted to do with those kinds of accounts. And it was very much, what are we doing with the accounts? Are we engaging with them? Do we have a success plan? Are we doing adoption reviews? Are we identifying and communicating risks within the customer success organization and across the ecosystem? We put in place some regional sort of risk mitigation fabrics as well, processes as well throughout that period of time. So it was a lot on engagement because we didn't have any other data, right? So ultimately, what I wanted to be able to do, and we have been able to do, is you want to be able to link customer success management engagement and link that to improvements in ultimately improvements in ARR and ARR growth, retention,
Sure.
ARR growth. And so the only way for us to do that was for us to say, be very specific about what the engagement framework was and what the expectation was for the customer success managers, track it using a tool like Gainsight, so that we could, over time, we could look at, and we looked at data now that we could say, okay, over the last 24 months, we have all this activity data. Now let's link the activity data to what's actually happened with the accounts that are getting those activities versus what's happening with the accounts that aren't getting those activities.
So in the spectrum of customer success, you've got from no touch to high touch, right? Yeah. And you're and there's all these activities in between, whether it's emails or phone calls or meetings or in person or whatever. And you're now able to, using Gainsight, I'm sure with some of your own reporting, people focusing on this, you're able to correlate the value of the activity to renewal and expansion of the account.
Right. We haven't been able to correlate the value of the specific activity, but we've said these 5 activities are the kinds of activities that we think will help clear the way for customers to adopt the product. And if customers adopt the product, we feel like they're going to be in a better position to get outcomes, and
which makes sense.
All those things. And so we can say, where do we want to be? Okay, these customers that have gotten at least 20 engagements or 20 of these deliverables or activities over the last 24 months, in general, are growing at X percent versus the customers that aren't getting better.
Well, I mean, you can maybe guess my next question here. I'll put you on the spot. Like, what's that bucket of activities that's moving the needle?
Oh, the bucket of activities it's really honestly kind of basic stuff. It's setting a success plan, right? It is doing adoption assessments or adoption reviews. It's doing executive touch points. And sometimes you can do these at the same time. And sometimes there's a technical element of where we have health checks that we need to do because we have they're very technical products. So we do technical health checks. And then we have something else that we measure as well that are more like advocacy type of activities, where if a customer gives us, they either do something that's an internal advocacy activity or something that's an external advocacy activity. We also count that as an engagement, and that engagement in general is a positive thing.
I'll show some of my colors here. I haven't heard of adoption review.
No?
I fake it. I fake being a thought leader in CS, and sometimes these things are exposed. So it sounds straightforward, but what is an adoption review?
Well, adoption review is this. So we have we sell software that's for what we call for service management. Service management is, let's say you're a new the software, the product we have historically it's called Remedy. It competes with companies like ServiceNow and Freshdesk and Atlassian. But really what it is it's a tool that allows the IT organization to address incidents in a systematic way, but also it's a way for HR or HR departments to be able to process employee requests, right? So you have a new joiner, right? So you use BMC's service management software, and the service management software helps automate bringing on a new employee, or when an employee leaves, all those kinds of things. So there are a lot of different modules that are associated with that service management capability, that product. And so what we do is we say, okay, there's basically a score of from 1 to 5, or 0 to 5, 0 being you're not using anything, to 5 being you're using pretty much all the modules and all the most important, highest value, newest capabilities. And each of these capabilities and things are linked to basic outcomes, right?
Sure.
Because for any kind of enterprise software, customers are fundamentally buying it to do, one of 5 or 6 things: reduce risk, drive costs down, make their employees more productive, help identify new revenue streams, things like that. Regulatory compliance.
I think that's it. I think you just spelled out the entire spectrum of why people buy software.
Yeah, those are the 5 or 6 things. So what we do is then we say, okay, based on how the customer is using the various modules, we can kind of map them on a spectrum of 0 to 5. And then we can have conversations that say, hey, look, here's where you're at in these areas, but you also own the rest of these, and you're not really using these like other customers are using them. Why don't you help us prioritize this as part of a success plan? And sometimes they'll use BMC services to help. Sometimes they use our partners. Sometimes they'll do it themselves. But it's kind of an adoption conversation.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Okay, I want to move the needle now to the last part of our conversation, which is you had mentioned kind of creating the vision and the objective for the organization. We're now in the start of January in 2025. You must have an objective and a vision for this year. I'd like to know what that is. And then talking about how do you cascade that through an organization of 1,400 people across 35 countries?
Yeah, that's a good one. So there's a lot of different frameworks. I won't go into the details of the frameworks, but there's a lot of different frameworks that you could use to articulate where you're trying to go as an organization, as a company or a function, and then what the priorities are from an execution standpoint, and then what the metrics are that help us inform whether we're doing those execution priorities. But we use something like that, and we
like an OKR type of system.
Yes, something our CEO has brought in from his previous experience is something called a VSEM, which is vision, strategy, execution, metrics. And so we do a 3-year VSEM that's a rolling 3-year VSEM that we reassess each year. And so what we do each year is we reassess. We reassess. The metrics don't really change much. Sometimes you'll focus on certain metrics if you're really trying to focus on certain run the business initiatives versus some change the business initiatives. But we have that construct, and each year we refresh it. And as part of that, we highlight. I said run and change the business. We highlight areas of the business that they're already part of our function, and there's something that we're already doing. We just want to focus on it because it's something that's going to make us better and make the customer better. And then there's change the business, things that we don't do for business as usual, but we need to change in order for us to continue to evolve as a function, as a company. And so once we identify those, call it 3 to 5 change the business priority initiatives, we align on what the metrics are, top 10 operating metrics and the financial metrics for the organization, and we cascade that out each year, and then we report on it on a regular basis in our town halls, where we say, okay, here are our initiatives. Here's the status on a couple of the initiatives. Oh, and by the way, here's how we're doing against our report card. From a run the business metrics and target standpoint. And my philosophy there is that scorecard, it needs to be realistically aggressive. If it's all green, then you're setting the wrong targets, setting the wrong expectation for the organization. It shouldn't be all red. It should have a lot of green, some yellow, and maybe some red, right? And that's just life in the big city. But you definitely communicate that on a quarterly basis. And then what I've been doing, at least the last 2 years, because it was feedback I got from the organization, was that each month I do some sort of communication that's organization wide. Sometimes it's a video, sometimes it's me talking with some of my leaders, talking about a specific element. Sometimes it's just a written communication, and we do like a regular organizational communication on things in between the town halls. That's the best way for us to do that.
Cool. Exciting stuff.
Yeah.
I wish you guys you know what? Actually, I want to ask you one question. I would be remiss not to ask you a final question. Self-serving in some way. what are you guys doing in the world of AI these days? Like, where are you in that
Yeah,
in that bubble?
it's a really, really good question. So I'm very big into using tools, and so we use Gainsight for CSM. We just actually purchased Certinia for professional services. We use Service Cloud, but then we're also supplementing those core systems of record, so to speak, with AI tools on top.
Mm-hmm.
So on the support side, we're using some tools to help with identifying customer sentiment issues before they become escalations.
Mm-hmm.
So we're using that. In support, we're definitely leaning in on using AI and some extra tools. We're using.
I mean, support is such a slam dunk, right? It's such a low hanging fruit.
Using some of our own tools actually, because we're using some of our own tools around monitoring to identify outages before they become outages for our SaaS customers. So we've done that, and then we've also worked on some tools that are about cleaning up communication. So having support analysts use these things to make sure that we're communicating clearly back to customers, which is a problem for us.
Sure.
And so support is where we started. Now we're moving into customer success management and services. So we're using, there's a couple of other AI kind of add-ons. We're using it just because it's top of my mind because I just saw it today. Something called Matic.
Yep.
To help us with freeing up time for CSMs.
Matic is for presentations, I believe, right? For compiling all the different data from sources.
Correct. So we've started to pilot there. We're moving forward there. On voice of the customer stuff, we're using something called Echoes on top of Qualtrics for us to break down NPS in interesting ways, which I think is it's not generative AI, it's more traditional AI, which I think is X analytics and AI. The next frontier for us is really professional services and CSM. We've very much focused in support. I think we've gotten some really good value out of it. Now it's CSM and services. And yeah, I mean, we definitely have, I feel like we're on the right side of the curve of actually using AI, generative and traditional, to actually make things better for customers, which is cool.
That's awesome. For a company your size, you're on the right side of the curve.
Yes. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Colin, thank you so much. It's always great hanging out. Great seeing you. And really appreciate your time. Wishing you the very best in 2025 for continued success.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate the time. And we need to meet in person here in the city since we're pretty close to each other. So let's make that a priority in the first 6 months, okay?
I agree.